In 1994, the U.S. Department of Interior designated downtown Moultrie as a National Register Historic District. This tour focuses on the history and architecture of landmark buildings in the district. It does not include the courthouse or the courthouse square, as they are the subject of a separate narrated tour. If you haven't taken the guided tour of Moultrie's Courthouse Square, you're invited to do so. You will find many things of interest in and around the Colquitt County Courthouse. This downtown walking tour begins at the old Moultrie Banking Company building, which is located on the corner of Main Street and Central Avenue, across the street from the courthouse. Before beginning the tour, you might be interested to know that Moultrie was created by the Georgia legislature in 1859. It was named county seat of Colquitt County, which had been created 3 years earlier. However, for the first 35 years, Moultrie remained a tiny village at the intersection of two dirt paths. As late as 1890, there were no brick buildings in Moultrie, and the town's entire population consisted of only 65 residents. In the 1890s, the growth of timber and naval stores, plus the arrival of the railroad, dramatically changed things. By the turn of the century, downtown Moultrie had begun to grow. By 1910, Moultrie's Courthouse Square was surrounded by commercial buildings on all four sides. By 1950, Moultrie was like most other towns across the South, such as Columbus, Georgia, shown here. In these days, before suburbs and the arrival of shopping centers, discount stores, and supermarkets, almost everyone did their shopping, business, and visiting downtown. And for farm families, a trip to downtown was a Saturday ritual of pleasure. In the early 1950s, downtown Moultrie featured hotels, banks, theaters, drugstores, restaurants, five and dime stores, as well as numerous businesses selling jewelry, shoes, clothing appliances, hardware, furniture. Also found on the downtown square was a host of other small businesses, such as barbers and beauty shops, offices for lawyers, accountants, and other professionals. The now vacant above-floor stores were occupied in the 50s. In addition to local businesses, nationally known stores such as Sears, J.C. Penney, Belk, Woolworth, and McClellan's were also found on Moultrie's downtown square. Downtown Moultrie bustled. In fact, by the early 1950s, downtown Moultrie was so busy that parking meters were necessary. Of course, as for most small rural towns, this would change. Increasingly, families had two cars and were more mobile than in the past. Across America, more and more families were choosing to live in the suburbs and other locations away from the downtown area. Reflecting the changes in residence patterns, shopping centers began springing up. In the case of Moultrie, the first was the Roses Shopping Center in 1971. It is across the street from our library. In 1976, completion of the Sunset Plaza Shopping Center south of downtown resulted in a number of downtown department stores leaving for the larger facilities that the shopping center could offer. Unlike some towns, Moultrie has been able to survive the loss of traditional downtown stores by adapting greatly through the Main Street program set up in 1989, a national program dedicated to the revitalization of downtowns. Buildings that once housed banks, hotels, and department stores now are home to a variety of small businesses and professional firms. Newer downtown clients include antique shops, specialty shops, offices, other businesses, loft apartments, and even a college. Across the street from the courthouse, what once was the lobby of a bank is now in adaptive reuse as a popular restaurant. Through the efforts of city officials, the Moultrie-Colquitt Development Authority, the Main Street Program, your chamber, historic preservation organizations, banks, and generous civic leaders, Moultrie has been able to preserve and restore many of its important downtown architectural landmarks. And it is a sampling of some of these landmarks that you will visit on this walking tour of downtown Moultrie. tour begins at the corner of Main Street and Central Avenue. Here stands the old Moultrie Banking Company building. This was Moultrie's first bank, established in its naval boom. It's hard to imagine life without a bank, but until 1896, residents of Colquitt County had no local bank. There were a few local businessmen who would make small personal loans for a fee. These were termed back pocket loans, as the loaner reached into his back pocket for the wallet and his record book. But if you needed a larger sum or you needed to cash a check, make a deposit, before this bank you had to travel by rail, horse and buggy, or ox cart to Tifton, Thomasville, or Albany. This involved a full-day round trip just to do your banking business. This changed with the arrival of timber and naval store businessmen in the 1890s. One of these businessmen was William Ashburn, who organized the Moultrie Banking Company in 1896, and he served as its first president. A new two-story red brick structure was originally built on this present site. The bank occupied the first floor with the law office and an insurance company on the second. In the late 1890s and early 1900s, as we've stated, Moultrie grew rapidly. Soon the bank needed more space. In 1924, the old brick building was torn down and a new two-story limestone building constructed in its place. The architect was T.F. Lockwood, who 17 years earlier had designed the nearby Carnegie Library building. Local contractor Anton Huber was in charge of its construction. Huber also built other downtown Moultrie buildings, including the four-story Colquitt Tower across the street and the four-story commercial building a block to the south. With the removal of timber, planting had begun and cotton had become king. This was our third economic boom, and yes, we needed a bank. The Moultrie Banking Company building is an excellent example of Beaux-Arts architecture, which originated in Paris in the 19th century. In English, Beaux-Arts means fine arts. This style uses many of the features of classic Greek and Roman architecture, such as columns, pediments, cornices, and balustrades, but it does so in a compact way that is more decorative than functional. In the early 20th century, many successful businessmen in America wanted downtown office buildings that reflected their wealth and their culture. However, because downtown space was at a premium, they often settled for compact adaptations of classical architecture, as exampled here. From a distance, the Moultrie Banking Company building resembles a Greek or a Roman temple, complete with Doric columns. However, these are not freestanding columns, but rather are attached to the facade. On either side of the building's entrance are two round pillars, known as engaged columns. As you can see, the columns are attached to the front wall. On the corners are vertical projections known as pilasters. At the top of the columns is a shallow portico or overhang. Above the entrance is a small pediment with beautiful scrolling and floral designs. Along the top of the building is a solid railing along with the two decorative balustrades. The Moultrie Banking Company building incorporates a tall and narrow facade with a much greater depth. In terms of size, it is not a large building, yet through skillful utilization of architecture, it creates an appearance of massiveness and security. Just an appearance the bank would want. In the 1960s, the Citizens and Southern Bank Company, C&S, purchased the Moultrie Banking Company. Because of this old building's small size and lack of space to allow drive-through banking, C&S built a new, much larger location on South Main Street in 1971. After the C&S Bank moved out, the Colquitt Loan Company purchased and moved into the Moultrie Banking Company building, and it remains there today. Next from the bank, proceed 1 block north along Main Street. On the corner of Main Street and First Avenue stands a two-story tan brick structure. This is the old Federal Building. Until 1919, Moultrie's post office had operated from rented space on the first floor of the Norman Hotel by the downtown square. In 1912, Congress appointed $65,000 for construction of a new post office in Moultrie. Construction of the new post office did not begin until 1917, and it took 2 years to complete. The new 2-story brick post office opened in July of 1919. Also, that same year, Moultrie mail carriers began using motor vehicles instead of horse and buggy. Times were a-changing. The new post office would serve Moultrie for 45 years. However, need for more space, especially for parking, led to construction of a new Moultrie post office on 1st Avenue Southeast in 1964. Afterwards, the old post office building was renovated and converted into offices for federal agencies. We called it the Federal Building. In the 1980s, Moultrie's federal agencies moved to a new location, leaving the Federal Building empty. In 1987, city and county officials urged the federal government to donate the vacant building to the city and to the county in order to preserve the historic landmark. But federal officials instead decided to sell the old building. Since then, the Federal Building has been privately owned and privately preserved. In 1996, Moultrie CPA Bruce Vines purchased the Federal Building for use by his accounting firm. Leaking pipes forced a major renovation of the building's interior. Today, the accounting firm of Vines, Ware and Magnum occupies the entire restored building. The Federal Building incorporates classical revival architectural style associated with British architect Robert Adam and his brothers in the late 18th century. The Adam style was an eclectic approach in which he incorporated both Roman and Greek architectural elements. This graceful treatment was inspired by discoveries of ancient ruins, such as those at Pompeii and Herculaneum. The style had a delicacy that was somewhat new to building decorations. Across the Federal Building's entrance and adjacent windows are 3 arches. Each arch contains an ornate decoration showing the radiating rays of the sun on a fully opened folding fan. In the center of the second floor are 2 large medallions. A cornice encircles the top of the building with balustrades atop the front facade. Across the street, you can again see the influence of this Adam style on the Harper McCall Insurance Agency. When he was commissioned to remodel the building, renowned Moultrie architect Frank McCall included radiating fans over the doorway and front windows with 2 large rosette medallions on the building's facade. Next, from the Federal Building, cross over Main Street to the 2-story red brick building on the corner of Main Street and 1st Avenue. Like many American cities, Moultrie once had a Carnegie Library. Its name was a tribute to Andrew Carnegie, or Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie was a successful northern industrialist who made his fortune in railroads and steel in the late 1880s and the early 1900s. Carnegie also was an incredibly generous philanthropist. He believed that education was a key to preventing poverty and preventing ignorance. Carnegie also believed that public libraries had a special role in making education available to large numbers of Americans. So strong was his belief that he donated over $40 million of his personal wealth to help build 1,700 new libraries across the country. Carnegie offered $10,000 to any community wanting to build a public library. To qualify, a community had to provide a downtown location and pledge to annually support the library with tax funds. In 1899, Carnegie funded his first library in Georgia with a $100,000 gift to the city of Atlanta. In all, a total of 24 Carnegie libraries were built in Georgia, including this one in Rome and this one in Athens. Moultrie's Carnegie Library came about because of the efforts of Colquitt County School Commissioner John Howell. At the time, there was no public library in the county, so in 1906, Howell contacted Andrew Carnegie to request funds for a library. Howell subsequently met with the Moultrie City Council. In early 1907, the council created a Moultrie Library Board, and it agreed to spend $100 a month to support this new library. J.B. Norman and his son Jeff owned a lot at the corner of West Broad and Crawford, 1 block north of the courthouse square, the spot where you now stand. This lot was valued at $2,500, and they agreed to donate a third of this. Other contributors covered the remainder. With his conditions now met, Carnegie personally approved a $10,000 grant to Moultrie, suggesting that the new library be of simple and dignified appearance. Construction began in 1907 and was completed in May of 1908. Architect T.F. Lockwood's design called for a 2-story red brick building with colonial revival and classical revival features. Perhaps most noticeable is the exaggerated white cornice with dentils at the top of the building. The front corners of the building are interlaced with rectangular stone blocks. These are both decorative and functional, in that they highlight and provide strength to the corners of this building. Also significant are the fan-light windows on the second floor. Historically, folding fans have been a popular architectural design, especially for the semicircular areas above windows and doors. The Carnegie Library's collection of books was housed in shelves at the rear of the first floor. On the right of the first floor was a large room that served as a reading room for adults. Opposite it was a similar room that served as a reading area for children. Today, these reading rooms are used as offices. Inside the entrance to the library is a foyer with separate staircases on either side leading to the second floor. Today, the second floor consists of offices and a conference room, but originally the second floor consisted of a single large room that could seat up to 200 citizens, along with the stage for readings and performances where the conference room is now located. The large room was used for community meetings, plays, concerts, and other events. In 1938, the second floor was modified for use as a vocational school. In 1963, voters approved a bond referendum for a larger library. The new facility opened in 1964. After that, the Carnegie Library building was used as a branch library until 1970. In 1973, Moultrie attorney Billy Fallon purchased the old Carnegie Library building from the city. He had the building restored and renovated under the direction of renowned Moultrie architect Frank McCall, Jr. Since then, he and Moultrie Mayor Bill McIntosh have used the historic Carnegie Library building as their law office. In 2002, the law firm commissioned Frank McCall's nephew, interior designer John McCall, Jr., to again remodel and refurbish the interior of the building. In 1982, the Carnegie Library building was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Next, proceed back towards downtown along Main Street. Along the way, you'll pass, on your right, a red brick building with arched doorway and windows. This is the home of Moultrie's newspaper, the Moultrie Observer. The newspaper was founded in 1894 and is the oldest continuously operated business in Moultrie and Colquitt County. This four-story building on the corner of Main Street and Central Avenue is known as the Colquitt Tower. Until the 1970s, this was the Hotel Colquitt, the largest hotel in Moultrie. Actually, there had been two structures bearing the name Hotel Colquitt in Moultrie. Both were located on the same site, and the Colquitt Tower is a renaming of the second building. The first Hotel Colquitt was completed in 1902, the same year that the courthouse was completed and the year of our economic boom. It was a three-story structure with a corner tower and had the distinction of being Moultrie's largest and